It all began with the protest to get an increase on their wages. 12,500 rand. That's what the irate miners were demanding. At the time, the average rock drill operator was earning less than 5,000 rands take home a month. In June 2012, Impala Platinum miners had gone on an illegal strike and successfully protested for an increase. It gave the Lonmin miners the courage to seek redress. They approached Lonmin management, demanding an increase as the work they were doing was physically exhausting and required long hours. But Lonmin management rejected their demands and refused to negotiate with them, as the miners did not have the legal notice to go on strike. The miners had refused to go through the correct bargaining structures and excluded long-serving union NUM and the new kid on the block, AMCU, from their plans. Their position to Lonmin was clear. The strike would be led by the miners, as was seen at the Impala strike. After several weeks of illegal work stoppages and management's refusal to play ball, more than 3,000 rock drill operators went on a wildcat strike on Friday the 10th of August 2012. The situation was tense. Several miners were brutally attacked simply for going to work and refusing to take part in the strike. Lonmin security guards recounted how the mood of the strike had taken an ominous feel. It was a side to the miners they'd never seen before at Lonmin. On Saturday, the 11th of August, 300 striking miners marched to the NUM offices, determined to attack or kill any NUM members that were inside. Mine security sent a warning ahead and urged the NUM shop stewards to vacate the area. They refused and waited for the angry miners to approach. In the ensuing confrontation, several shots were fired. 2 miners were critically injured and left bleeding on the streets. The surviving miners fled to the nearby hostels. Residents and eyewitnesses have suggested that the confrontation was the tipping point in the escalation of violence by the striking miners. Despite mine security being sent in to try and calm the situation, the damage had already been done, and the striking miners were out for blood. Having assessed their risk to their eastern, western and Korea shafts, Lonmin management escalated the matter to involve the South African police. On Sunday, the 12th of August, striking miners again gathered at the nearby Wonderkop Stadium. Security tried to get them to disband, but to no avail. After several minutes of failed talks, the miners attacked the 10 Lonmin security guards. 2 mine security officers, Hassan Fundi and Franz Mabalani, were hacked to death by the protesters and their vehicle torched. The 2 men had tried to escape but ended up trapped in their service vehicle. Police found the charred remains of Franz Mabelani inside the car. Hassan Fundi's body was found nearby with parts of his mouth, chin and cheek cut out.
Monna ka na go betso a khatilwe molomo a ntshitswe di-organs ene go worse because now ke the following day dintho tsela ke ga di nyeumile yana ke ge ke gana shaite yotlhe ya left ke ga a chile a sa apara ai bona ene go tla mo commission go bile worse because ke gonna go bona gore monna ka motshegare otlhe wa re ke gale ga ba seno mmolaya di-strikers o sala a sa apara motshegare otlhe.
The rest of the security guards had managed to flee the scene, but watched helplessly in the distance as their colleagues were killed by the miners. Extra police backup was called in. The following day, on Monday the 13th of August, a group of 300 miners began marching from the Marikana town across the railway line towards the Korea shaft. Police intercepted the group. Commanding officer at the time, Captain William Mbembe, recalled how police negotiated with the striking miners to lay down their weapons. The miners refused to give up their weapons, but asked police for an escort to the nearby Kopi so they could continue their protest there. Police agreed to escort them. Unbeknownst to them, the miners had decided to attack the police. One policeman was critically injured. 2 others, Warrant Officer Tsietsi Munene and Silo Lepaku, were hacked to death. 3 protesters were also fatally wounded. Munane's family says they still don't know who is responsible for his death.
That's why the injuries are so severe. Only the injuries are too much. We couldn't even government I couldn't believe that's him.
Later that day, the bodies of 3 more mine workers are found. The strike ran unabated for 4 days. In the lull before the tragedy, the illegal strike had claimed the lives of at least 6 Lonmin miners, 2 security guards and 2 policemen. Scores more were left injured and hospitalized. The 300 militant miners returned back to the Koppie by the nearby Wonderkop Stadium. It would be the headquarters at which most of their meetings were held. Emboldened by their victory over the police, the miners believed themselves invincible. At the time, the men had contacted a Sangoma from the Eastern Cape who had given them a muti called Intelezi to give them courage. The Sangoma wanted to make more muti that would make the men invisible to police bullets. To this, he needed 2 sheep and human body parts. The animals were slaughtered and parts of their flesh and fat mixed with the human remains and burnt into ash. The ash was mixed with some muti and animal blood to make this concoction. Controversial police witness Mr. X testified that the Sangoma had used a razor blade on some of the men, making small incisions on their foreheads before smearing a black gel-like potion on them. These procedures, it was believed, were part of the process to prepare them for battle against the enemy. He told them to provoke the police into attacking them before they hit back. 5 men were chosen to lead the strike, and they were believed to be the strongest and bravest of the men, and would be responsible for communicating with the police and management. Minerals and Resources Minister at the time, Susan Shabangu, promised to step in by working with police to quell the wildcat strike. Authorities and politicians scrambled to figure out what had caused the Marikana Platinum Belt to spiral out of control. The socio-economic issues were identified: poverty, lack of housing and insufficient employment. For those who were employed, it was a struggle to get by on their meager 5,000 rand salary. A leadership vacuum was also identified, seen in the dissent between the miners and the National Union of Mine Workers leadership in the area. NUM was also seen as too close to management and subsequently lost its organizational rights at the mine after its membership numbers dropped from 66% to 49%. This lack of confidence in the NUM opened the space for the new kid on the block, Amku. The new union was made up of mainly former NUM members who'd broken away from the NUM to form their own union body. Till today, the miners have denied that their strike was led by any of the 2 unions and have claimed that they wanted to get the wage increase from Lonmin themselves as workers. It was this determination by the miners to fight for what they believed in that took Lonmin by surprise. And it was at this point where the situation had become a powder keg ready to explode.
This government is going to massacre those workers. They are going to kill them. Then I pleaded with them. I said, comrades, leave Koppie. The decision has been taken. We are going to be killed. And after my long speech, and many workers started to move. You could see that they were starting to move. They really adhered to my call. If they were given a space, I'm telling you, we wouldn't be in this embarrassment that we are a laughingstock of the world. In a democratic society, the government killing its own people the manner in which they did.
Several factors came into play. Various political and industrial heads intervened to try and calm the situation. A police operation was put into place to disarm and defuse the angry miners. This operation was called D-Day. It culminated in an horrific event that left the country reeling. The 16th of August 2012, was one of the worst industrial strikes in post-apartheid South Africa. Not since the 1960 Sharpeville massacre had the country seen such a horrific loss of life at the hands of the police. The shooting down of 34 miners at a Kopinye Lonmin's K4 shaft at Marikana was condemned the world over. Many of the fallen victims came from neighboring countries such as Zimbabwe, Lesotho and Swaziland. A large number of them came from the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. The bodies of the 34 men found in two scenes were flown back to their homelands for burial. The loss of the family breadwinners was devastating to many of the families. It left children orphaned and wives widowed, with little to no means of putting food on the table and clothes on their backs. The brutality of the Marikana deaths led to the setting up of the Marikana Commission of Inquiry by President Jacob Zuma. Its mandate to probe what contributed to the strike of 3,000 miners. Police denied that they used undue brutality and set out to prove their case at the Marikana Commission.
It is regrettable that so many lives were lost in a dispute that should have been handled within the constitutional and legal framework governing labor relations in our country.
Human Rights Commission.
The Commission sat for the first time in October 2012 at the Rustenburg Civic Centre, and emotions were high.
Hey, what happened is, what happened? I can explain. What says I think how can keep paying me?
But he did what he did and fair and almost blaming over. And they said he was repeating. I was so angry. My brother said, I need to stop him. He said, no, I'm going to.
Most families still refuse to accept the police's explanation of their actions. Nkosi Yabo Qabile was shot at least twice by police. His grandfather is still battling to come to grips with his death.
Kodwa Maria siyakhula iCommission into bengicinga mna ingayenza kuba bengicinga uba mna one ulonmini uzawuthi abantwana bethu balimazile ngephutha ingozi thina amapolisa athethe inyani njenge-Truth Commission sebalimazile abantu sinsaphazamiseka nge-13.
It took 6 months before proceedings got fully underway. The widows of the miners claimed they were not provided with enough resources to attend the proceedings. The legal representatives of the injured miners and the widows demanded that the state pay their legal fees as their clients could not afford legal representation. Legal Aid South Africa submitted to their demands but warned that paying these legal fees would put a strain on their financial resources. In May 2013, the commission was moved to Centurion in Tshwane as the financial costs of the hearing were piling up. Initially, the commission was supposed to run for 4 months, but the overwhelming amount of evidence and the growing witness list led to the commission being granted at least 4 extensions from the presidency. To do otherwise would have called the credibility of the commission into question. It took 18 months for the commission to conclude its work, with testimony from 56 witnesses heard. Among them were police, lawmen, the injured and arrested miners, AMCU and the NUM. Several high-profile individuals also took to the witness stand, each denying any overt role in the shootings. 279 miners were charged with the murder of their fallen colleagues.
The decision to charge the miners who were arrested by the police for the murder of their colleagues who were shot by the police was a dark day in the history of the National Prosecuting Authority. There was no evidence that those 200-odd miners had done anything wrong, especially not committed any murder, and really looked like the state had prejudged the situation and were aggressively misusing their powers to try and attack a weakened group of people, or vulnerable group of people.
In 2014, the National Prosecuting Authority dropped the charges against the miners, but it seemed like a case of too little too late. The damage to the reputation of the NPA was already done. In the months that the commission was running, several key witnesses were murdered under mysterious circumstances. It led to Judge Ian Farlam demanding a stop to the senseless killings.
We'd want to place on record that as SABC it is with a deep shock to learn of the assassination of the Sangoma implicated in the Marikana Muti rituals, who has been gunned down yesterday morning, early hours in the morning. And this was immediately with an imminent attempt by the police to get hold of him as a witness in these proceedings.
Well, that's obviously a very serious matter, and thank you
Indeed,
for drawing it to our attention. This is the second person who has links with this commission in some way or other who's been killed, and it's a matter of great concern to the commission, and I'm sure to everyone else involved.
NUM official Branch Secretary Dalivuyo Bongo was killed on October 5th, 2012. He was shot 6 times at his home at the Wonderkoop Hostel complex. AMCU's potential key witness in the inquiry, Mawetu Steve, was killed in a tavern in May 2013 before he could testify. His death triggered suspected reprisal hits on 2 NUM members, twin brothers, the same evening. Another AMCU leader's decomposed body was found near an extractor mine in Limpopo in June 2013. His hands and feet were tied. The Sangoma, who had apparently performed the rituals on the Marikana mine workers, was shot and killed in Bizana, Eastern Cape in March 2013. Elton Georgia, 69, was gunned down in his home after several armed men confronted him. Bongani Metlonkomo, an AMCU branch secretary at the Western Platinum Mine, was gunned down on his way from a nearby tavern in 2014. Many of these murdered men were implicated in the testimonies of various witnesses. But analysts believe the murdered witnesses would not have shed any further light to the commission.
It was witnesses for all sides from different groups. So it doesn't really look like one side particularly was being targeted. There's a lot of violence in that area and witnesses were killed. However, the large number of witnesses to the events of that day that took place in Marikana and that were available to come before the commission and give evidence suggests that the absence of 1 or 2 witnesses from either of the parties won't really undermine a fundamental finding of what happened on that day.
It raised the issue of union rivalry once again. The NUM's membership numbers had become redundant.
The underlying problem, I think you've just hit the nail on the head, was an issue of people in leadership positions not being leaders.
Yes, I would agree with that, especially in career, what happened in career. Because people, I would say that comrades were comfortable in leadership position. They didn't like any contestation in their position. It's either they were not confident enough that they will be re-elected. And that's what we are all advocating every time. That's why we have got a term of office. So that if people are still happy with Eric, they can go and re-elect Eric.
And AMCU had risen to become a force to be reckoned with.
We are facing a huge challenge as the South Africans in terms of transformation, the economy transformation. The 1994 processes, the only thing that one benefited was a political processes. Who's going to be a black president? If the economy is still in the hands of the few, and then the ANC hasn't done anything in terms of changing the status quo, the chapter cannot be closed and there will be no healing, especially for those that lost their loved ones. So I believe through the evidence that have been led through this commission, there will be consequences for those that did participate in brutally murdering people at Lone Min. If there will be no consequences, we are simply saying there will be another Lone Min massacre. Maybe there is an Anglo massacre that is coming. Maybe it's another Anglo Gold Ashanti massacre that is coming, because workers are not yet liberated. They haven't tasted the fruits, of the democracy in terms of the spin-off of these minerals that we own in South Africa.
Many have blamed Union AMCU for further inciting violence and undermining the work being done in the Marikana Platinum Belt.
Whether AMCU was involved in instigating the violence, if they were, that obviously would be completely beyond what is legal. And if there's any evidence that they were involved, then people should be prosecuted for it.
Then Police Minister Nathi Mthethwa testified that he'd heard about the shootings through the media, while Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa denied that the controversial email he had sent to Lone Min executives on concomitant action to be taken in Marikana was meant to exert political pressure on politicians.
In all these relationships that you tried to even suggest are incestuous, I would say that if someone is trying to help solve a situation which would either save lives, would either advance the common purpose of everyone, it should never be seen as a conflict of interest. You came to me here yesterday as counsel and you said, I've been trying to be certified as senior counsel. Is there anything you can do for me?
No, that's not true.
And
no,
I said,
no, that is untrue.
Yes.
You mustn't. No, but he can't come here and make up stories. You can't make up stories. He said to me, "Are you senior counsel here? Tell the story as it happened, Mr. Ramaphosa."
Don't interrupt with the witness.
No, but he must not lie.
When he's finished, that's a question we don't have to go into now.
Mr. Ramaphosa, if you can misrepresent something that happened less than 24 hours ago, and tell an untruth about the sequence of what happened, then one shudders how much misrepresentation and falsification you can put to the events where your integrity and your criminality is in question.
The former Minister of Minerals, Susan Shabangu, was adamant that her actions were not dictated by undue influence, and that her characterization of the strike in Marikana as a criminal element was justified. National Police Commissioner Ria Pieka maintained that her office's actions were just as they were facing a life-or-death situation. More than a year of simmering tensions in the platinum sector followed after Marikana. It culminated in a protracted strike called by AMCU in January 2014. And it took 5 months before the strike was resolved. Newly elected Minister of Resources, Nwako Ramatlhodi, brokered an agreement that saw miners receive a 1,000 Rand increase in their salaries and a once-off bonus of 2,000 Rand.
It had been running for 5 months.
By March 2015, the Commission's findings and recommendations will be given to the President. But will all the evidence presented to them serve to create a clearer picture of what truly happened? And will justice be served for the widows and the loved ones of all the 44 men who died in August 2012?
We'll have to look for the report and see if the report really gets to the heart of it. But there has been a lot of revelations at the Commission already, which were some revelations we would not have known about if there was no Commission of Inquiry. So overall, I think it was a good idea to have such a commission.
One thing is certain, the country will be closely monitoring the outcomes of Judge Ian Follam's report and the response by President Jacob Zuma. Nozintombi Miya, SABC News.